Hello, my name is Mark Baer. You're watching YourTown TV. My guest, Greg Baker, and Advanced Consulting. Welcome.
Thank you, Mark, for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so here we are at in AMP Studios, and we're in the middle of a transition. Paul Congo, who's been here forever, at least almost 20 years, I believe, is transitioning, and we're bringing in a new executive director. You were tasked the job to find that person. You brought us an amazing bounty of talent, and let's just talk about your relationship with AMP.
Well, we were fortunate that there was an amazing bounty of talent out there, and so it made the job easier. But I think the story goes back to about 3 years ago with AMP and myself, when I was asked to come in and work with Paul Congo and do an operational assessment. At that point in time, AMP was interested in making sure that everything operated as efficiently as possible. It was preparing to do some new things, so it wanted to make sure that everything was in sync, working well, efficient, and that if there were any new things that needed to do, that I was to make recommendations. So
it's a long-term relationship. Let's step back 1 second and just say, what does Advanced Consulting do?
Okay,
exactly?
Sure.
So,
well, we're a management consulting and training company, and historically we've worked mostly with large corporate and government clients. We focus on helping businesses and people advance the way they work. That's our slogan. And there are a lot of ways that we do that. Our traditional niche has been teaching consulting skills to people in businesses, and that started teaching consultants to be better consultants. But over the years, those skills have become more and more needed by everybody in business, so our business expanded into those markets as well. And as well, we've expanded from consulting skills into other soft business skills.
Let's get a little more granular into your particular approach at this, because I've got to see you work up close over the last 3 years, and it's kind of refined what you guys do.
Let me use the example of the recruiting effort that I just helped with at AMP. There are probably 3 or 4 things that I think are important to me to bring to that work, but also are important to ensure a good outcome, when it's all done. And the first one, it sounds like a no-brainer, but it really has to do with attitude. When I'm brought in to help a company with something, I realize that I'm going to help them, the business, the people they serve, and that means you're touching the lives of a lot of people, and I take that very seriously. So that's kind of the beginning. Another one, and we teach this to consultants, so this is really me eating my own dog food, but it's not just about what you do, it's about how you do it. And how you do it is equally important. So if you imagine that every time you have an interaction with a client or a stakeholder on an engagement, it's like a moment of truth, and you can either build relationship and trust, or you can erode it. And at the end of the day, you want it to all add up in the positive direction. So I pay a lot of attention to how I do things and how I interact with people.
Well, my impression was that, from the view of the board, you kind of immerse yourself as almost family, and this board has a lot of this board, and the AMP has a terrific board, and a lot of it's been together for a long time, and
yes.
it works in a family way almost, and you were able to come in and kind of join the band in a way, and then lead, and people because a lot of people come in to lead, but nobody follows.
Right. Well, the key to that, I think, is coming in and putting yourself in the shoes of those who you're helping.
Yeah.
And that means looking at the world, the work that we're doing, and even me through their eyes, through their perspective. And then by doing that, you sort of almost become them. You said become a part of the family, and it really did feel that way to me. I feel very much a part of the AMP family, through the work and the relationships we've had and all that. And but that's the key, is really putting yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
And being them, because once you're them, you feel the same responsibility, in this case, to find the best talent out there for the future of AMP. And I think I felt that as much as anybody else.
Our new executive director, Christine Wingy, she's going to do a fabulous job, but everybody that was there was just so, what a cornucopia of riches that it was. And we were just humbled by, the talent out there.
I took great pleasure in the fact that it was a very tough decision for the board when we brought together the top 3 candidates for the board interviews. And that told me that I was doing my job. And they were all great. Any one of them could have done the job. But in the end, we picked Christine.
Yeah.
And she's wonderful. She's got tremendous talent, tremendous experience. She's going to do great things with AMP. And we're lucky to have her.
Yeah, so she'll be on next week, and but let's get to your book.
Okay.
So you've been writing this book. You've been sitting on this book for 20 years, thinking about it, ruminating, and let's go back. It started in college and to your crew days. Let's just start it from the genesis.
Okay. Well, the book is called "Managing the Energy of Business: The Hidden Energy of Business: Dawn of a New Era." And so I like to introduce that kind of concept of energy and managing energy with that story about crews. So a long time ago, more years than I can count, I rowed crew for UC San Diego and Mission Bay Rowing Association. And I most often rowed in the 8, so there were 8 rowers and a coxswain. And I occupied the stroke position. And since in crew we row backwards, right? I was in front of the rowers, but I was the last guy to cross the finish line, just to kind of give you an orientation there. But what that also meant is that I could see the puddles from the oars float by with every stroke. And more accurately, we floated by the puddles, but the point is they were on display all the time. And it turns out you could tell a lot about the stroke of an oar through the kind of puddle that it left. A good hard stroke left a big round puddle with a hole in the middle. A stroke that wasn't being pulled so hard, smaller puddle, smaller hole. A stroke that had trouble getting out of the water was distorted. And so you could tell a lot, about those, but it didn't stop at the oars. There's this phenomena called shooting your slides. And in crew, the oarsmen sit on a slide that goes back and forth. And so when you take your stroke, you go forward and then pull back. And everybody is supposed to follow the stroke and go back and forth at the same time. Well, with young crews in particular, sometimes they have the tendency to do what's called shooting their slide. And that means they come forward too fast, too soon. And it has this effect on the stroke of making it really hard for you to go up your slide. So I felt like I was putting as much energy into going up the slide as I was, back. So, and of course, I would always tell the coxswain what was going on, and the coxswain would, holler back to the crew, and, we would fix these things, because in crew, it's all about being in sync. But then those are some of the negative things, but then there's this thing called swing, when everybody is in sync and rowing together. And the boat would start to hydroplane on top of the water, and you could hear bubbles under the hull. And it was just a magnificent feeling of energy all pointed in the same direction. So why that story is applicable is that rowing a boat is all about energy, and it's work and energy going in the same direction. Some of that made the boat go in the direction we wanted, but some of that actually pushed against it, and the net of it is how fast that boat went. So in business, it's no different. The indicators are different in business. In rowing, there were puddles and bubbles and difficulty going up a slide. But and in business, there are other things. But any work effort is no different than rowing a boat. So I thought, for many years, as you said, 20 years, how do I say this, and what is the language that I use to kind of bring that concept into business? Because I see, for example, so much conflict in business these days. That's all pushing against the boat. And it can not only slow the boat down, enough of it can sink the boat, and that plays out in business every day. So I wanted to find a way to bring the notion of that to business and identify what those indicators are of energy that anybody can learn to watch. And when you do that, it turns out it reveals a much bigger picture of what's going on, so that you can make much better decisions about, well, first understand what the real problems are and then solve the real problems.
And so energy, just going back to the original metaphor, or the real reality of the boat, when the boat was going correctly, was that easier on everybody? Was everybody able to conserve energy, to
absolutely.
Focus energy?
Yes.
Because if you've got friction, it's easy to burn out. Mm-hmm. It's easy to lose focus. It's easy to not meet your goals. It's easy to be at cross purposes. And it's hard to see unless you have a way to see.
Well, and it's so true. There must have been 100 articles about why initiatives fail in business, and to this day still some 70% of initiatives fail in business. And by initiatives, I mean change initiatives to do things differently and all that. And, a lot of people have come out with their opinions, and of course I have mine. And the real reason why most initiatives fail is they run out of energy before they get to the finish line, because of all those things you're talking about. Energy's been
dissipated.
Exactly. And the things like conflict are pushing in the opposite direction, canceling out the positive energy. And at some point, companies, they get distracted. They don't have enough money to put into it to bring it all the way through. And in some very dysfunctional companies, frankly, I've seen, it's almost impossible to get anything done because everything you do is battling all that misalignment of energy.
Let's talk about some of the myths that you're trying to dissuade people of in the book.
Well, one myth, since, we do a lot of training, I've seen this myth quite a few times. Let's say there's a company and it's trying to improve its customer focus. And so it comes up with an idea saying, let's put everybody who touches a customer in training to be more customer focused. And so they do that, and people get these skills and all that. But then invariably it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because the company has all this dysfunction within the way it operates, within its organizational structure, within its processes, its systems. And I go into that a lot in the book. And trying to do a training solution is like putting a Band-Aid on it. But the Band-Aid invariably falls off, and people see and are exposed to that negativity and dysfunction anyway. And so there goes the customer experience. So one of the myths is you can pretend things aren't there. You can pretend that it's the people talking to the customers that are the problem, when in reality, it's not that at all.
So in your system, is your system doable?
It's doable because
there's a lot of theories, but if your theory isn't doable, applicable in a way that it's graspable quickly.
Sure, yeah. I talk a lot in the book. I tell stories that I've experienced. A lot of this comes through my direct experience actually doing a lot of these things in business, and businesses of all sizes. And I also put models down that people can use to apply these things and to understand what things need to be adjusted to fix problems. And I have a whole series of methodology on it. So it's applicable. It's not that complicated to understand. It's really no more complicated than my rowing story, the only difference being there are different kinds of indicators. If I see two groups of people who are at odds and in conflict, well, there's an indicator, and it indicates a certain set of things that have to do with negative energy. And it turns out, by the way, that most conflict is not intentional. It's unintentional. Joe doesn't wake up in the morning and say, I think I'm going to go throw Harvey under the bus.
Yeah, right.
Joe throws Harvey under the bus because there's some circumstance that he's in that makes it seem like that's a good thing to do.
So you need systems, and you need to be able to recognize. So you need to, be able to recognize a problem, and you need to have a structure to deal within that. Very quickly, we're going to lose time here, but I want to talk about the fourth industrial revolution a bit.
Sure. Well, the World Economic Forum, I believe, was the first to make the statement that we are now in the fourth industrial revolution. And there have been three before, of course. The last one was the information age. Well, now we're in the age of robotics and artificial intelligence. And in that, there's a lot of talk these days about, so what are we as human beings going to do in the future when robots and AI take over a lot of the work that we've traditionally done? And the answer really kind of boils down to interpersonal services. And those, of course, are services, which have an interpersonal component. And there are a lot of examples of that: doctors, salespeople, people who work in teams who have to interact, people who are coaches and therapists. So there's a lot out there that's already there in interpersonal services, but in general, we have to get a lot better at interpersonal services. And interpersonal services, when you boil it down, is really always a form of collaboration. Whether it's you and I working out something, even if I'm selling you something, we both get something out of the deal. So it's a collaborative conversation. So I really drill into collaboration and define what I think collaboration really is, which is an alignment of the different energies that we all bring to the table. Some of those are intellectual, some are personal, some are environmental, the things around us, and some are directional. And so, the work that I did with AMP, for example, where there's a big board and a lot of people who are stakeholders and all that, a lot of it was about building the alignment of those energies. And I sort of did that quietly, but was one of the real secrets.
Well, you did a great job. I wish you tremendous luck on the book.
Thank you.
And look forward to working with you as we go, And what's your hopes for the book? What's the last thought for this?
Well, I hope it'll start a conversation.
Yeah.
I hope that it will help reduce conflict. I hope that it will help produce more joyful, prosperous, productive working environments. I think that it'll help our bottom lines in companies. And, I just would love to see the world move in that direction and be a better place.
Great. Greg Baker, Advanced Consulting. What a pleasure.
Thank you, Mark.
And thank you so much for all this work that you've done for us, because you really did a terrific job.
It was my honor. Thank you.
This is a real pleasure.